Good morning, everyone. We're happy to have you here this morning. I'm going to give us another minute or so and let a couple more folks join in. Happy to have you with us this morning, and we're excited to share some great content with you and get your thoughts and questions as we progress through this. We've got a ton of content for you, so we're excited, and the group is happy to have you here. In the chat, I'm going to drop a link to a quote-unquote playbook. This is kind of something that you can use as a tool, either just to look at while we're going through this, or if you want to print it out, you're welcome to. We've got space for notes as we progress through our panelists, and we welcome you to use that. I'll obviously send a hard copy or a PDF version of this to you after the session this morning, along with the session recording, and we'll make sure that we get that all to you. So again, we're happy to have you here this morning. What I'm going to do is just kind of lay the ground rules. I see that most everybody has their cameras on. That's great. Welcome. We want to see your smiling faces, and it makes this as interactive as possible in a Zoom setting. So I'm happy to see that so many of you have done that. Would like you to keep mute. Everybody is, so that's great. And then as we get through towards the end of the session, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question. As we go through the session this morning, before the end of time Q&A session, please drop stuff into chat. Please, make it interactive. That way it's top of mind, and we can kind of go through that chat towards the end of the session and say, great, let's start with this question, and just kind of work through those in a really efficient manner. So that's really all I have in terms of the game plan for this morning. We're excited to have you, and I'm going to turn things over to Jamie Wolf over at CMA. So Jamie.
Great, thank you so much, Bob. Really appreciate it, and welcome everyone. Just quickly, in terms of the view, I think we're all pretty familiar with Zoom these days, but that doesn't mean that we won't accidentally mute or unmute ourselves when we don't intend to. But on the view, if you'd like to see your entire screen, please select Gallery View in the upper right-hand corner. If you want to see each speaker one at a time, go ahead and select that speaker view. We'll also be pinning our speakers just to make it a little bit easier. This is going to be a really fun rapid-fire, round-robin opportunity, and the topic that we have for you today is what we loved and learned from the pandemic. So in the spirit of never letting a good crisis go to waste, we wanted to compile and share with all of you what some of those silver linings were for all of us as business leaders and owners, and hopefully one or two of these nuggets can help provide you some great ideas for 2021. As Bob mentioned, he did put the presentation in the chat if you would like to open and follow along, as we will be moving pretty quickly. You might find that helpful. Each of our speakers is going to have 3 to 4 minutes to share their wisdom, and if we can stick to that, we should have about 10 minutes or so at the end for Q&A. So as Bob mentioned, and I'll try to remind you, please use that chat. Just let us know what your questions are or any additional ideas that you might have while our speakers are talking. All right, so on to our great lineup here. We've got some great experts and advisors who span the gamut of industries and expertise. And first up, we have Brad Crandall with Affinity Law Group, who's going to talk about how you actually might expand your business during challenging times. Brad, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Yeah, as Jamie mentioned, these are tough times, and what I want to point out to everybody is during these times, though, it can be a great time to actually expand through mergers and acquisitions activity. If anybody on here is struggling, then we feel for you, but there's a lot of businesses that are doing very well during these times. So if yours is a healthy one, it's an ideal opportunity to be opportunistic right now, a great time to do that and look at acquisitions to grow, and that's both during this pandemic time and post-pandemic. I would suggest maybe even for a year or two at least after that. So with that, look at your competitors. If there are some strong competitors that you've had through the years that maybe didn't have the IT background to go virtual as well, some of the other infrastructure to stay as strong as maybe you have, look at those, look at customers, look at suppliers, both vertically integrating up or down, And, you know, in my opinion, buying a struggling business, it's a good thing really for everyone, because it's obviously good if you can grow your business and make it stronger for the long term. It's also great for the sellers. You know, we run along a lot of businesses, and some people have just kind of come to the end of their rope, and the business is hanging in there, but they could easily be enticed to sell if somebody came along with a fair offer and offered to take over some of the struggles that they've been dealing with. And if your business is in a position to add on and be able to fold it in with your own, you know, that can be great for the sellers. It can be great for their employees. It can be great for your customers. And thus it's, you know, ultimately good for the entire economy, for the strong businesses to absorb the ones that are struggling. And I'm not talking about being predatory, it's just opportunistic. So, you know, as far as timing, I would suggest that some of these opportunities are going to last for months, maybe years to come. During the Great Recession of 07, 08, you know, there was a little bit of a lag time, but we started seeing acquisitions pop up in 08 where we would have some of our good clients call and want to look at a competitor or one of their customers that they didn't want to go out of business, or one of their some suppliers that they needed to make sure was there to supply them product. And that lasted for a couple of years. We did an acquisition in 2010 that was really a 2-year lag from that 08 recession. You know, you kind of can think of changing your focus sometimes to buying companies out of bankruptcy or buying them from banks through Article 9 sales. We did quite a bit of that from about 08 to 2010. And, you know, that's not something to be afraid of. Those laws are put in place to give you a nice clean break from any issues that the prior business had, and give you a fresh start going forward with a new line of business, or, you know, continuation of your own. Some of these businesses are struggling, but they're still really good businesses ultimately. And then lastly, I guess, if you pursue that, you know, we have come across in the last year or so some special representations and warranties and indemnities that really weren't around a year ago, having to do a lot with compliance with some of the COVID-19 laws and the Ppp loans and things like that that are unique to these times. So I would just suggest keep your eyes open and don't be afraid to expand during these times, because it can really benefit you in the long term. With that, I'll pass, Jamie.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the perspective on how that can be a win-win as well, in growing not only your business, but maybe saving one and their employees and customers in the same time. Okay, next up, we've got Richard Warrener, who is a Senior Vice President with Bank of America, and talk about taking care of oneself, which is where we've been spending a lot of our time with our clients as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I thought about it kind of from when I saw this question, I thought it was a beautiful question in light of what we've all experienced in the last 12 months, and really broke it down both from a qualitative and quantitative standpoint. But I do think that first statement around just trying to take care of oneself can apply both personally and corporately, as I have witnessed both within our own firm, but also within many of our clients. If I can maybe start by the qualitative comment that I mentioned, and you know, the realization that we had within our own company, and then even conversing with many of our clients, is that just the whole concept around the impromptu visit that we had gotten so accustomed to prior to COVID really just went away. And the net effect on many relationships was not positive, right? Or let's just call it what it was, negative. And so one of the major takeaways that I think that has been very intentional in trying to maintain relationships both outside our company as well as within our company is to really set aside time to make sure that we're connecting with our colleagues, our clients, obviously our clients, our vendors, any type of support staff, centers of influence. And just that more intentional outreach has become ever more important, just because of the lack of face-to-face interaction that we're seeing in this quote work from home environment. So I want to highlight that from a qualitative standpoint. Secondly, you know, the other part is that feels to me like that we're all in these back-to-back meetings. And one thing that my senior leader recommended to us not too long ago was that, hey, obviously be very conscientious of those parties who are on your calls. And if you can, try to end it 5 minutes early so that everybody gets some extra time for that brain break, is that they're constantly going from one meeting, virtual meeting to another, so that they can allow themselves the time to kind of be their best when they attend their next visit. So again, anything that we can do as a host and trying to provide some extra time for those who are on the meetings with us is very well reserved. Maybe flipping the switch, if I will, to more of the quantitative observations that we've had in 2020 and 21 is that, like you said, from a personal standpoint of trying to take care of oneself, corporations had to do the exact same. And so we saw an immense shift in creation of liquidity throughout the pandemic, where corporations were either shortening their working capital cycle to generate cash, accessing new forms of liquidity, just to try to preserve their existence throughout the pandemic and the fear that came with that. We don't see that trend changing right now. We're still seeing, I'd say, very significant forms of liquidity on balance sheets, and that has shored up a lot of the financial health for many of our corporate clients that we're witnessing. And so that trend is continuing even as we're kind of coming out the other side of the pandemic. We're probably seeing more intentional focus around just the overall financial and mental health of employees of our corporate clients. And so kind of the concept of, yes, we've maybe made it through this dark time, but at the same time, how healthy and how prepared are our employees for the future? So again, I broke it down a little bit in both a qualitative and quantitative standpoint, and those are some observations from myself over the last 12 months. Thank you, Jamie.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. I really, really appreciate that perspective. I know we're seeing it quite a bit, but as psychologists, I would expect us to see it. So I'm glad to hear that other business leaders are appreciative of these challenging times and all of the Zoom fatigue that we are experiencing as well. So some great tips. Give folks a little bit of a break there. Okay, well, next up then, we've got Eric Darr, who's a director with BKD, and he's going to talk to us about helping a little bit with your cash flow. There's some opportunities out there that he's going to help make us aware of.
Thank you, Jamie. So at this time last year, before the pandemic began, most of us probably felt like the pace of business and the pace of change was as quick as it's ever been. And that change was mainly for the better, to generate growth, expand, become more efficient, essentially striving to meet your future goals at your own desired pace. Then when the pandemic began, drastic change happened overnight, whether you wanted it to or not, at a pace we hadn't really seen before. And this was a different kind of change. At first, we were shifting more to maintain and sustain mentality for the short term, rather than the change we were used to around growth and expansion. So we changed the way we budgeted. We took deeper dives and more frequent reviews of cash flow projections, and evaluated how and what we wanted to invest in with our business. So with this topic, I took a little different approach, and I wanted to cover a few of the brief points related to the rapidly changing federal relief opportunities out there to help supplement your cash flow needs, in hopes this will help you maintain employees and sustain business until we're through this. So the first one I wanted to cover is the employee retention credit. So this is a tax credit that is up to $5,000 per employee for the calendar year 2020, and it was extended for the first 2 quarters of 2021, and the available credit is up to $7,000 per employee per quarter. So very lucrative credits. And these are available to all taxpayers out there, even if you received a PPP loan. The only difference is you can't double count wages for both the PPP loan and these tax credits. So for the employee retention credit, you may qualify if you fully or partially suspended operations during the year related to a governmental order, or if you experience significant decline in gross receipts when you're looking at 1 calendar quarter in 2020 compared to the same in 2019. And with that gross decline, or that significant decline in gross receipts, there's different requirements for 20 and 21. Next on the list is the FCRA credit. So the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act. So this is a refundable tax credit to reimburse employers for the cost of providing paid sick and family leave for up to 2 weeks, so 10 business days, while employees are on leave for COVID-related purposes. So whether they had to quarantine, they had children that had to quarantine, and so on. So this provision has been extended for part of 21 as well. And with a 21 extension, this is on a voluntary basis for businesses. The next one on my list, I won't go into too much detail. I think we're all probably very familiar with PPP loans. I'm sure we hear about those in the news almost every day, but just wanted to point out that applications for the second draw PPP are being taken until the end of March. And then lastly, one that's not talked about quite as much is the net operating loss provisions. So when we talk a lot about tax planning opportunities with federal relief, it's geared around the PPP loan and various tax credits. But they also extended the net operating loss provisions to where we can carry back net operating losses up to 5 years. And with the current tax laws, there's ways to accelerate deductions to put yourself into a tax loss, not necessarily a book loss. And if we think about 5 years ago, those were years when we were in higher tax rates than what we're in now. So the net operating loss provisions provide us both an opportunity to monetize losses now, get cash now, in addition to recognizing those losses in higher tax years. So those are just a few of the relief provisions that are available. There's quite a few others, both federally and locally, but I would say those are the large ones and most common ones that are out there right now. Back to you, Jamie.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate that. And very timely topic. I know taxes are certainly on my mind. I got my big old packet from my CPA, so I think everybody's thinking about some of that right now. All right, well, next up, I know a couple of our presenters have hit on the topic of culture and well-being, and Kelly Huber is really going to take that home for you. She's a consultant with CMA.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yes, I'm going to take the people and culture angle here today to build on some of the ideas. So we're a firm of organizational psychologists. And so, of course, we've known for a long time that culture is important. We just didn't realize how important it would be in carrying forward an organization through a crisis. So we have a very tight-knit culture at CMA. We've found that our clients who have a tight-knit culture have really been able to traverse this season more successfully. So we want to focus on this, more intently for not only CMA, but our clients, is to think about helping them define the culture they want to be and nourish that culture. I'm seeing a lot of ideas in the chat about how to do that in a remote environment. We've engaged in a lot of these, like murder mystery nights or weekly Zoom meetings, all the way to, more importantly, the day-to-day behaviors that really help carry a culture forward. So, taking 5 minutes in a Zoom meeting to connect with each other before diving into the agenda, using good technology like Teams to connect on more of that personal level. We also coach a lot of leaders, and so we've been able to hear the lessons they've been gleaning in this season that they want to carry forward. So the first one is this idea that self-care is not self-indulgent. It's good for you. It's good for your teams. And so what we know is that individuals have a hard time focusing when they are anxious, when they're stressed. So the leaders we're coaching have focused a lot more on employee well-being and remembering it's important for morale and productivity. Also, as it relates to communication, this has been great practice in the season where we've had to be more intentional with communication when, the hallway conversations, organic communication really is no longer a luxury. So this season has created some good practice in, putting more energy and thoughtfulness into sharing your ideas, asking questions, articulating your vision, learning new technology to help exchange information much more quickly in a way that we think will hopefully carry forward post-COVID. And then the last biggest lesson we've been hearing from our coachees is that trusting your employees is really good for morale. So we have a lot of clients who've been pleasantly surprised with how productivity has still continued to remain high in a remote environment, especially for those clients who maybe were a bit more traditional, didn't allow for as much flexibility. And so they've been pleasantly surprised. That's in alignment with a lot of the research that's been going on in this area for years on the topic of remote work, that it is related to higher productivity, higher job satisfaction, higher retention. I think there's a moment here to be considering that a lot of employees, now that they've had a taste of remote work, will be looking for a bit more of it. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And so it'll be helpful to think about, to the extent that this experiment was helpful for you in working from home, how can you allow for a bit more of that flexibility as a competitive advantage and retention strategy. With that, I'll turn it back to Jamie.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly. Quick reminder, I know some of us have been posting in the chat. Please feel free to join in the conversation and ask a question. Make this as interactive as we can here virtually. Okay, next up, Mike Minkler, President of Cmit Solutions, talking to us about a very hot topic around cybersecurity, mobility in the cloud.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate the opportunity this morning to share our experience as a managed IT provider, taking care of technology at 125 companies in St. Louis. There's really some great news here. Most of our clients, and I'm sure many of you, were able to pivot pretty easily from working in the office to working at home. This is especially true in the B2B space, but not true for all industries. There were clearly some winners and some losers. And in many ways, we spent the last 10 years getting ready for this by making upgrades to our technology. We just didn't know we were getting ready for a pandemic. There were really three key areas that we saw where this happened. The first is cloud. Companies have been investing in moving key services like email to the cloud with solutions like Microsoft 365. We've also seen applications like accounting and ERP systems moving to the cloud. Cloud makes access to the systems from anywhere on any device a whole lot easier. The second area was cybersecurity. Corporate networks have been upgraded with more robust firewalls, providing secure remote access to data and applications that are still on the company network. We also saw business leaders today are much more aware of security risks and understand their corporate networks expanded into their employees' homes, and they had to be protected. The third area is mobility, or the ability to work from anywhere. We've had collaborative solutions like Zoom and Microsoft Teams that became our killer apps. And companies and users with desktop computers had a harder time going mobile than laptop users. Most employees have high-speed internet at home, but some don't, especially in outlying areas. Rural companies sorry, hold on here a second. Rural companies were clearly at a disadvantage in working from home. Really, to sum it up, this pandemic, if it would have happened 10 years ago, we would have seen a massive drop-off in productivity, or more reluctance for companies to have employees work from home. Businesses that were further down on the adoption cycle on cloud, cybersecurity, and mobility had the upper hand. Investments in technology continue to improve our business agility, efficiency, and competitive advantage. There's three key actions I would like to leave you with today. One is continue to move to the cloud. If you find yourself behind in moving data and applications to the cloud, now is the time to make some moves. And then adopt collaboration. Solutions like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Slack are here to stay and will continue to drive productivity even after this is all over. Have a strategy to ensure you're getting the most out of these technologies. And then finally, evaluate your cybersecurity. Your corporate networks and your attack surface have expanded, increasing your risk. This can be done pretty easily through checklists and reviewing best practices. implement solutions to fill any gaps. Thank you all very much. Back to you, Jamie.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mike. Much appreciated there. Really helpful information. Okay, so our next speaker actually can't join us. He's having a little bit of RV trouble. He's on the open roads, I think, taking a little needed R&R. But I do want to comment. So this is for Brandon Dempsey, Go Brand Go. One of the things that he mentions here is, you know, even though we're on Zoom, try and make that as much of an in-person experience as possible. Adjust that webcam to be eye to eye wherever you can. Every once in a while, take an opportunity to try and look into that camera as opposed to down to your keyboard. That will help increase your outreach. I would agree with him. I have found prospects and clients much more available over the last year than what I had historically. And I think it's just because you can jump on a quick Zoom meeting for 30 minutes and do coffee that way, as opposed to feeling like you've got to drive somewhere and make a whole ordeal out of it. He says, focus on your core market here. I like his little note, generalists get talked to, specialists get paid. So basically what he's saying is, who do you serve and what makes you different? What makes you unique? What makes you the incomparable expert in your market? And then last one, fortunes are made in downturns. And I think Brad talked about that. How do you set your business up for success and ready for growth? What are some opportunities that you can take now if you have a good balance sheet and cash flow that others might not be able to take? All right, Hal, I'm going to turn it over to you. Hal is a business performance advisor with Insperity.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for the intro. So Insperity, our business is working with small and mid-sized companies, kind of anything from 5 to a few thousand employees across the country. So I'm going to give you kind of some insights of what we've seen from our service teams, particularly here local, and kind of what the reactions have been from clients and and what we've learned from this. So to echo kind of Kelly's comments about the remote workforce. I mean, I think obviously that's the big change that's happened over the last year, is that many of us have learned that we can work very effectively in a remote work environment. And I think that that's a piece that's going to move forward. It's going to impact certainly, how our employees and how candidates that are looking for us to come to work for us, as do I want to come to work here? It's going to be a benefit, I think, that employees are going to be looking for, at least certain employees. One of the things that we've seen that it's impacted our client base is that many of our clients weren't used to recruiting employees in this remote environment. So using Zoom and kind of how to effectively use these pieces in order to bring employees into the organization. How do I make that judgment? And I know that some of them have said that that it's easier because you can kind of concentrate more on who you're talking to as opposed to what you might have in an in-person conversation. The other piece that we're seeing that the remote workforce is going to drive going forward is, how do you mix that in? What do your policies look like as you move forward? Who can, who can't, how much? And it's not going to be in all of one or all of the other, I don't think, going forward. So how do you make that split? So going to need to begin to look at that piece, and I think it's going to be a plus. I think that going forward, we may spend less time from 7 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning looking at the back end of somebody else's car. So that's not a bad thing. The other pieces that we have seen is that again, and I'm going to echo a little bit of Kelly, is that we have really seen how vital people are in the organization. We've been one that have preached this for a long, long time. But if you have a good culture, if you have good people, that's going to be very important. And how you take care of people in this kind of environment is important as well. I mean, all of us have seen stress in this, right? Where I'm looking around and there's a lot of us sitting at home where we're isolated and have been for a long time. How do you deal with that? A lot of us have had, there's been illness, there's been loss. I just kind of queried a couple of our service teams yesterday, and this is probably out of about 70 companies. But I asked, what was the COVID impact, and what came back is that there had been 4 or 5, actually about 8 or 10 deaths in organizations. So it's an impact. We felt this. So how do you take care of people? Do you have resources in place to help provide an employee assistance plan or counseling as folks are going through this kind of thing? Because again, that makes people more productive. The other piece that kind of has gone on in 2020, which isn't so much pandemic related, but the movement towards civil justice is changing things, particularly in the small business environment, and beginning to look at, how do we put in place a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce? So do we have a strategy for that? Do we have a mission statement put in place for those kinds of things? Do our managers and leaders understand it? Do our employees understand it? Kind of the last piece in this is flexibility and adoption. So we've learned that if you got to be able to be a flexible organization, you need to have succession plans in place, those kinds of things. I'm done.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hal. Much appreciated. One of the things that we've been thinking about and hearing from our clients in terms of this remote workforce is how that might actually help increase our diversity and our clients' diversity, because we have a much broader pool that we can now recruit from than historically, where we felt like maybe everyone had to be located in one of our 3 offices. So it just really has increased the overall recruiting pool, which can give us a lot more options in terms of diversity that we can work with. All right, Matt Salaberry is a financial advisor with Moneta, and he's going to talk about making sure you know those levers that drive your business and that you are well diversified.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Good morning, everybody. As Jamie said, my name is Matt Salaberry, financial advisor with Moneta Group. We have 3 primary service lines, including personal and family financial planning, 401k, consulting for privately held company benefit plans, and then also a separate practice that I lead in business transition planning. But the 3 key talking points that I want to hit on today really are key talking points no matter what environment we find ourselves in, not just a pandemic, but I think the pandemic has really re-emphasized the importance of some of these planning opportunities. The first is for business owners and executives is clarifying your business value and value drivers. You as business owners, business leaders, you deal with a lot of unknowns during any business environment. The value and value drivers of your business should not be one of them. Statistics show that on average, a business represents up to 80 to 90% of an owner's net worth. It's not only your largest and most illiquid asset, it's also your clearest path towards accomplishing your personal financial goals, whether it's retirement or building multi-generational wealth. Now, if I took a poll of some of the business owners joining us today, and I asked you if you have a strong understanding of your business value, I bet a majority of you would say yes. But yet a national survey conducted by the Exit Planning Institute, national survey, indicated that only 18% of all owners have gone through a formal evaluation process in the last several years. So why is this the case? I mean, maybe it's the cost, maybe it's the time, maybe you as owners believe you have a crystal clear understanding of what your business is worth, but why not have that belief confirmed or clarified by an independent outside valuation expert or a certified exit planning advisor? To me, this is one of the most critical pieces of information that an owner can have. And just think about all of the amazing information that you can glean from a valuation. Once you have better clarity around the value of your business, you can integrate it into your own personal and family financial plan. You're in a better position to make that distinction between income and value. Income being what you see on the bottom line in your profit and loss statement, value being the strength of your intangible capital. It's your people, your processes, your customers, your culture. And lastly, with improved clarity around the business value and value drivers in your business, you're better positioned to have more meaningful conversations with your business partners, your family members, your key employees, and your professional service advisors to ensure that everyone's aligned and working together towards a common set of goals. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is, if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's that none of us know what the future holds. We all know of somebody in our life that's struggled with illness, or maybe we've even lost a loved one. We don't know what the future holds. And the same dynamic holds true for a business. And we know that the business is critical to the long-term financial viability of owners and their families and employees. Yet 40% of all businesses have no contingency plan in place to deal with what I refer to as the 5 Ds. It's death, disability, divorce, distress, and disagreement. So here are a few talking points around developing a contingency plan. Obviously, if you have business partners, it's critical that you have some form of buy-sell in place, or if you have one in place, maybe it's worth revisiting it to ensure that the document contains crystal clear triggering events for an ownership transfer. There's clearly defined valuation methodology and clearly defined mechanics for on the funding source for a potential ownership transfer, whether it's insurance, seller, or bank financing. And then you have to be sure to really ask yourselves key questions. Or hard questions, but they're important ones. So what happens if an owner or a key person in your business dies or is incapacitated? Is that person critical to customer relationships, a bank relationship, employee morale? Who steps into that owner or key person's roles or responsibilities if something should happen? Is there key man insurance in place to infuse the business with cash to stabilize the company, pay off debt, retain key employees, fund an executive search if necessary? These are all key questions that owners and management teams should be asking themselves, and certainly it's applicable to a family business as well. So, if it's the goal to keep that business in the family for multiple generations, who in that next generation is the right person to lead the organization? Do they have the interest in running the organization? Do they have the skill set, the aptitude, the knowledge, or is it appropriate to hire a outside professional management team to be the caretaker of the business for the benefit of the family? These are all questions that should be asked and answered and documented. So that's kind of the last key talking point around the contingency plan, is once you've developed this contingency plan, make sure it's documented and shared with all of the people that are important in your life. And don't lock it away in a file cabinet or in a safe at home. Share it with all of the people that it impacts. And then the last talking point is really the importance of diversifying your personal and your business and your personal balance sheet. So the pandemic's taught us no business is fully insulated from disruption. And again, we know that as business owners, your financial future and the business are connected at the hip. And with 80 to 90% of an owner's net worth tied up in the business, that can be a scary proposition from a diversification standpoint. But that doesn't have to be the case with a well-balanced personal or family financial plan. Now, I've spent a lot of years working with business owners, and I have prior experience as a commercial lender. So I understand the importance of earnings retention and building a strong balance sheet positions a company favorably for expansion, acquisition, or just accumulating cash for the next inevitable business cycle. But building your personal balance sheet is just as critical to diversification in your client base or your employee base. An owner's financial future should not be 100% reliant upon a successful exit or transition of the business. A successful exit or transition should be really the cherry on top. So I would encourage you all to, if you haven't already, to get with your professional service advisors, your financial advisor, your banker, your CPA, to ensure that you're striking the right balance between earnings retention and extracting value from the business over time to allow you to accumulate assets and build your personal balance sheet outside of the business. And this will inherently de-risk your personal or family financial plan. That's all I had, Jamie. I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate you talking about the foundational concept of having some of these documents in place. I know for those of us who are business leaders and owners, it sounds like, well, yeah, right, we should do that. We get that. I cannot tell you the number of businesses that I work with that do not have these important documents in place. And I think it's because you have to have some difficult conversations often in order to get these things in writing. And I just want to assure you that those conversations become much more difficult once one of those triggering 5 Ds, I love that, Matt, thank you. Once one of those 5 Ds happens, so they're much easier to have those conversations up front. All right, next up on our list, Paul Klug, a partner with Polsinelli.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Jamie. So my 3 points really kind of revolve around communication. And so I would say my first point is, small talk isn't so small anymore, meaning that what I learned is that, talking to clients and talking to my colleagues here at the firm, just jumping on a phone call or using the new technology, Zoom and what have you, and just diving straight into the business at hand, usually a good idea, but in these times, maybe not so. And what I've learned is, taking the first 10, 15 minutes to talk, especially to clients, about what's going on in their lives, what's going on with their businesses, what's going on with their employees. There's questions that can be asked and answered, and things to learn about the clients and colleagues, for that matter, that I never knew before. And just taking the extra time to get to know them and talk about them, because I think, with the pandemic and things going on, I think people were anxious to just talk about things, not necessarily just business driven, but about themselves and their families. And so I think that helped me anyway get a much better understanding of clients and colleagues throughout this time. I think that was a big benefit for me. That sort of dovetails into that communication, especially with clients, really brought to the surface clients wanting to talk about weaknesses that the pandemic exposed in their business. And those weaknesses could have been business. I think folks this morning have already talked about the financial, but there were other things that came to light. For example, relationships with employees. And so from our perspective, it gave me the opportunity to introduce clients to other attorneys and colleagues in my firm that were in other areas. I do a lot of M&A corporate work, but for example, a client who wanted to strengthen the relationship with their employees, that the pandemic sort of exposed maybe weaknesses in their employee manual, or what's been, maybe giving these folks equity and coming up with a better executive compensation plan for key employees to see, because the pandemic exposed some stress on those relationships and wanting to retain those folks. Other areas that came to light that Matt just touched on was, if I go down with COVID and I'm out 2 weeks, who takes over? And so from a succession perspective, both short-term and long-term, do I have that succession plan? And who is it? And who's going to take the reins if I have to be out for a couple of weeks or a month? I had several clients, husbands and wives, both, who had COVID at the same time. And, who was still running that business when that was going on? And again, that all goes to the communication, keeping in constant contact, learning what was going on with these owners, and then being able to get them lined up with the folks at our firm from taking more of a holistic approach to the representation, and not just honing in on one aspect, but finding out what their needs were. And their needs changed. And what they found out during the pandemic, they didn't have those needs beforehand. And so that was all good to learn. And then lastly, with regard to communicating with the clients, not to necessarily overload them with information. A lot of firms, ours included, I think, got into a routine of sending out so much correspondence, 1 or 2 alerts a day. And for some people, that's great. They like to hear things right away. For others, they don't need and want that clutter in their email inboxes necessarily. And so I took a little bit different approach and tried to pick and choose what I thought was the most important stuff to my clients, and actually had subgroups of clients in different emails. One subgroup on the PPP loan program, those who really wanted the information about that, and our office in DC, who had a team just focused on that. But trying not to inundate them with too much information, but at the same time making sure they're still getting the information, and the information would change. And so you got all these emails out one day, and then it changed the next day, and so you had so taking time on that with the correspondence, I think, is another thing that at least I learned out of this that, that I think helped benefit our clients and quite frankly, our colleagues at our firm. Back to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I had a very similar experience of really trying to even further increase client intimacy, client relationships. Anytime we put out plenty of blog posts on well-being and stress management and culture throughout this pandemic. And so I would just send that on to, one or two clients, letting them know I was thinking about them and if I thought it was particularly relevant to their situation. So I love that strategy, more personal touch. All right, Jimmy Abbott, he's a relationship manager with Regions Bank and is going to talk, probably going to build on what I just said there, talk more about relationships, adaptability, and culture.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the fourth consecutive day of the sun shining. I think that's a welcomed topic for everybody. Very important. We're about 3 weeks away from a year into the pandemic, and the three most important things I learned is relationships, adaptability, and culture matter most. We saw a lot of people move from an office setting to a home setting like I'm in today. The difference is a lot of businesses didn't. A lot of businesses were on the front lines every day, and that's the thing that we had to learn most is how do we adapt to that setting. As we moved into the back half of the year, one of the things we saw is that M&A has come back with a full force. M&A is important. It's an important strategy. It's an emotional topic for a lot of business owners who may be entering into a stage of, do they plan for the next generation? Do they sell to private equity? Or do they sell to a strategic or employees? It's important to remember that once that emotional decision is made, it's on to the financial side of it and make sure you protect that. But what matters most in making that emotional decision for clients in a family enterprise is that the employees, the name a lot of times, if you're in a second generation and a business owner, they still share the same last name as the founder. They want to make sure that that goes for the next 100 years. So while a multiple may be very important, banks have plenty of capital to lend right now. There's a lot of cash on the sidelines. Most importantly, the values, the employees, and the name matters most in the legacy that's been built. Secondly, what we learned is a week in 2020 was equal to 21st century's month. If you're planning a meeting 6 weeks from now, you're probably going to be you're probably going to be left in the dust. Everything changed so rapidly and so quickly that we realized that it's a function of staying close to our clients. And if instead of that 6 week meeting, you ask somebody, hey, how about next Tuesday? And largely they're going to be able to do it. And that goes between customers, vendors, and other various constituents of a business. So that's important. The last thing I'd say, that be curious. This last year has led a lot of people to deepen relationships with their customers, with their vendors, with the people that they call most important. The more you learn, the less you know about them. There's people who sit in their businesses every day and know the ins and outs. And I, for one, found that I deepened a number of my relationships last year because I was curious. I probably should have asked the questions in person a little bit more, but I think what's happened is people are willing to share. There was a lot more vulnerability and a sense of, hey, we all need to go and approach this together. And so as you learn more, let's make sure you keep asking the questions and understand what the future holds, because ultimately, I would say 90% of relationships that I've seen have been deepened, but that has to be intentional. And that intentional aspect of the want to becomes authentic, and it really shows that you care about companies and your networks, about their progress and their well-being. So, Jamie, I'm going to kick it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. I would wholeheartedly agree with that deepening of relationships. I mean, there's nothing like having screaming kids in the background and your face turning into a cat and barking dogs to really break down some of those airs and power differentials. I actually had a meeting where the woman's child came in and put their pet rat on her shoulder. She didn't really react. I don't think I would have been so calm if someone had put a rat on my shoulder. So that absolutely breaks down and opens those lines of communication. Okay, so Michael Fink, our strategy expert with Rock and Sand, is going to talk to us about remote work. And he did ask that no one look at the Michigan sign behind his shoulder. So please ignore that while he's talking.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. For better, for worse, I'm a Wolverine, so let's just put that behind us. I'm a strategy expert, and when's a good time to rewrite your strategy? Well, there's never a good time, there's never a bad time. Strategy needs to be ongoing, and you need to be challenging it. And so much has changed in the past year that people need to sit down and go through a strategic planning process somehow, some way, to challenge your assumptions, because the game has changed for just about everybody. So that's what I do. And I encourage you to go to my website, Rock and Sand. And I also have a new offering called the School of Rock and Sand, where I have one of the things in the School of Rock and Sand is a strategy process in a digital box that you can lead your company through yourself, or with just a little bit of help from someone like me. So what I want to talk about really today is something I've learned, but it's interesting. I think I already knew this. Remote work is here to stay, obviously, as Hal said and several other people, but remote work is not new. This is nothing new. It's just more prevalent here now, and we've been forced into it. But remote work really isn't about efficiency. It's about effectiveness, not efficiency. You see people like REI just built a new headquarters, and they've decided to sell their headquarters because their workforce is remote, and it's more effective than it was when they were all in place. Now, that may not happen for you, but they focused on effectiveness. Now, it's not new. In the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s, in a former life, I was an executive with the temporary help industry, and we had remote staff, not temporary employees, but remote staff who assigned and interviewed and all that. We called them satellite offices, and I would encourage you to think in terms of every one of your remote workers as a satellite office of your company, and think about the things you need to do to integrate those people with the other remote or satellite people. We had a remote staff member at on site with a client. Her name was Yvonne Crozier, and she worked with a particular office, and this dysfunction started to occur because they didn't see each other day to day. And all those things that Kelly and others have referred to, the common conversations that become the ties that bind people together and allow them to work together and have each other's back, which that's really important part of high performing teams, that disappeared with Yvonne. So what did we do at this time? And we were working from phones and paper, no PCs, no George Jetson type Zoom thing. It's like we have to integrate Yvonne into the regular office's routine one way or another. And so think that way. We had people walk a mile in her shoes when she was on vacation to take turns, so they understood what she was going through remotely. We made sure that they participated in staff meetings and saw each other. So the same things apply here. Focus on outcomes. and effectiveness, not time spent. In coaching a number of my clients, I've had CEOs and leaders like, I'm not sure they're putting in enough time to get the work done. Walk away from that. What are the outcomes you want? And think about effectiveness. Proactively build in the ties that bind. Think of Zoom as a relationship building tool, not an efficiency tool. Most people look at it as efficiency, and it is more efficient. That means you have time to build in some intimacy and effectiveness, empathy first, then solutions, ask and listen. And the 4 basic leadership questions apply here, and everyone needs to do it. Tell me what's working. Tell me what's not working. Tell me what you need. So what are we going to do? Jamie, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Much appreciated. I know we only have you for a few more minutes, and we have 2 more great speakers with ideas for you. First up, Jamie Jabori, who is president of Showalter and Jabori.
Good morning. I am going to watch so we can get done on time, and my friend Tom can come up behind me. As you guys can see, a lot of the topics I was going to talk about today have already been covered by this great group of professionals, and I wrote down a lot of really good points for myself as well. So as president of Showalter and Jabori, I have the unique position to be able to help a lot of our clients and to help a lot of our colleagues through everything that's going on. And I can't say enough about the importance of relationships and about the importance of putting people in positions where they can be successful using their strengths. And just to let you know, one thing that we've been spending a lot of time with our clients and with our own business as well is maximizing efficiency by removing some of the manual processes. Using technology, using Power BI, using key performance flashboards, using Bill.com, integrating, linking, so that manual tasks that have to be done over and over can start to be eliminated, and using a lot of that extra time to spend some time on these Zoom meetings and to do some of the other things that we're doing, because business is happening so much faster now. So that's my Cliff Note version, Jamie. I'm excited about hopefully seeing some comments and being able to interact with everybody more.
Thank you, Jamie. Much appreciated. Straight over to Tom Swift, President and CEO of Swift Systems.
Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for being here this morning. It's good to see everyone here. So we are software developers and consultants. We help companies build and buy software, and sometimes we do a bit of both. So right into the topic so that we're cognizant of your time. So my topic is slow down to speed up. And at first that sounds pretty counterintuitive, right? Why would I slow down to speed up? I need to go faster so that I can get everything done. You may have also heard relax to go faster. I heard a story from a motivational speaker once where he was in a Formula One race car driver, and the driver kept screaming at him, relax, go faster, relax, and you'll go faster. And he didn't understand, but later over time, it came to him that if you slow down to speed up or relax to go faster, you will actually accomplish more. So to share a little bit of our experience during the pandemic, we did just that. We slowed everything down and we became more intentional about every step forward. We looked at our people, processes, and systems. We focused on making everything better than it was before. One really important factor is we worked on getting out of our own heads. So, as everyone knows, you don't know everything. So we focused on content that could only drive us forward. It is okay to turn the media and the social media off at times. It gives you time to focus. We talked with other business owners. Let's face it, it's kind of lonely at the top. You don't have a lot of people that can relate to what it is that you do or relate to being an owner. So join a business group, get in with some kind of a focus group where you can learn from and experience what other owners are doing. So we really tried to use that lull to work on the business. We truly compiled a list of 70 items to focus on in between projects. So if things got a little bit slow in that lull, we jumped in and we focused on the business. Rather than just working in the business. So some suggestions, look for bottleneck people, processes, and systems. So people, processes, and systems. You have to look for bottlenecks in all of those things. We established a team to specifically look at that, and I would suggest the same to you, to establish a team to look at those things. Most people think that software is going to fix all of their woes. It just flat out won't. Software on top of broken processes is broken software. So you need to fix the process first, and then you have to go into use software to completely eliminate tribal knowledge, training, bad habits, and daily reinventing of the wheel, which is costing you time and money that you don't really know about. And then we learned to trust our people more. We implemented a remote workforce and a hybrid workforce. So we have more people working out of the office. We have more people working in and out of the office than we ever did before. So we learned to trust our people. We coached the ones that needed a little bit of work, and then we let go of the ones that we couldn't trust. So now we're collectively working less hours and accomplishing more and spending more time with our families. So the employees love it, and business owners need to figure out a way to make that work, because otherwise you're going to start losing staff to companies that have those capabilities. So the bottom line, use technology to get more done faster. Use technology to meet more people, as Jamie and Hal mentioned, using Zoom instead of driving all over the city, and implement the web apps and the mobile apps that you need now in order to be stronger on the other side of this. And as our topic today states, never waste a good crisis. Thank you. Back to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Tom. Perfect wrap up. We're at time. Thank you to our experts. All of their contact information and our key ideas are in the playbook that was just posted in the chat. Really appreciate the time. Bob, any parting thoughts?
Just want to thank everybody for being here and taking some time this morning. I know time is valuable, and I especially appreciate our last couple of panelists who really kind of had to work to get us to time. So thanks to Tom, thanks to Jamie. When we got this much great content rolling around, sometimes you know, it's hard to keep to that. So I sincerely appreciate their attention to that. Again, Jamie posted the link to the playbook with contact information. So because Jamie and Tom had limited time, feel free to reach out to them and pick their brains on some of the other things that they had listed in their playbook points. So please be doing that and reach out to anybody on that. You'll all receive a recording. I'll work to get that out by week's end. And looking forward, we are working hard to get to an in-person event here later on this year. So our target initial date is late May. We'll obviously monitor things and adjust accordingly, but we're looking forward to being back in person with people when it's safe to do so. And we've got some great content already in the box for that. So we'll hope to see you there. Thanks again to everybody for being here, and everybody have a great rest of the week. So thanks a lot.